What if everything you believe about death is only half the story? What if one man, one of the greatest minds in psychology, had a glimpse beyond the veil and returned with truths that could forever change the way you live? This isn't fantasy. This isn't folklore. This is the untold story of Carl Jung, his journey past the edge of life and the revelations that followed. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who helped shape modern psychology, wasn't a man given to wild imagination. He built his career on logic, precision, and profound insight into the human psyche. But in 1904, a medical crisis would catapult him into an experience that defied everything even he thought he knew. It started with a heart attack. Jung collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. As his body lay still in a hospital bed, machines ticking, doctors scrambling, something extraordinary unfolded. He later described the moment not as a hallucination or dream, but as something real, more real than waking life. I had the feeling that everything was being sloughed away, Jung wrote. Everything I aimed at or wished for or thought, the whole phantasmagoria of earthly existence fell away or was stripped from me. From that moment, Jung's consciousness lifted from his body. He saw the room from above, watched the doctors work on him like a distant observer. But soon even that scene faded and he entered what he could only describe as a boundless space, a place without ceiling, floor, or walls, a pure field of being. He called it the void of creation. There were no voices, no colors, no noise, and yet somehow everything he needed to know was there, understood instantly, as if knowledge were no longer transmitted by thought or language, but simply known. Within this vast stillness, Jung sensed other presences. Not people in the physical sense, but souls' consciousnesses. They felt familiar, and though they didn't speak, he knew they recognized him just as he recognized them. There was a sense of belonging, of reunion. And then something even more remarkable happened. Jung entered what he later described as the life panorama, a full review of his earthly existence. But it wasn't like watching a movie. It was immersive. He felt not only his own experiences, but also the impact of his actions on others. Words he had spoken, silences he had kept, moments that once seemed small were now brimming with emotional resonance. I was what I had done, he recalled. I was my life. There was no judgment, no heavenly court, just a deep, undeniable clarity. Like a mirror reflecting not just the face, but the soul beneath it. And in that reflection, Jung said, you finally understand not what you did, but who you truly are. This was no allegory, no poetic device. It was, according to Jung, a real experience, and it shook him to the core. When he awoke days later back in his body, the world felt dull and distant, as if he had returned not from sleep, but from a greater, deeper reality. True life is not here, he often said afterward. We are merely guests, travelers, students. And this was no romantic metaphor. Jung had seen it, touched it, felt it. The soul he came to believe is not bound by death, but transformed by it. He described seeing realms beyond ours, places of light and movement, energy and intention. Not clouds and harps, but layers of existence that echoed like musical notes, each soul resonating where it belonged. Some regions were still and tranquil, others pulsing with activity and transformation. The afterlife, Jung believed, wasn't a reward or punishment. It was a mirror of inner vibration. We don't go to a heaven or hell. We arrive where we already are, without our masks, without our titles, with only the truth of our being. In private conversations with close students, he explained, the soul carries not actions, but their essence. Not the deed, but the intent behind it. If a person lived in truth, they rise light as air. If they lived in falsehood, they feel it as weight. But even then, there was no eternal condemnation, only an invitation. An invitation to grow, to become more aware, to return and try again. Jung saw souls preparing to come back to earth, not forced, but choosing to feel again love, again struggle again, not because they had to, but because something deep within them longed to evolve. He described one such soul preparing for incarnation, not like a scene from a film, but like a symphony, a swelling of sound, light, and energy converging into form. It was beautiful, meaningful, and it showed him what so many of us forget: we are not here by accident. We are not mistakes, we are intentions made manifest. You come here, Jung said, because there is something within you that only Earth can bring to light. And this is where the most powerful part of his story unfolds, not in the visions themselves, but in what he brought back. Jung didn't preach, he didn't demand belief, he invited remembrance. When he spoke of these experiences, he did so with gentleness, with emotion. Sometimes he cried not from fear, but from awe, from the overwhelming feeling that he had touched something so true, so sacred, that life itself seemed a dream by comparison. The hardest part, he confessed, wasn't leaving. It was coming back. Living in a world that had forgotten, acting as if he hadn't seen what he had seen. But he knew. And quietly he left behind writings, conversations, clues for those who were ready to see. If people remembered who they are, Jung wrote in a private journal, they would stop fearing death. Because death is not the end. It's the beginning of another stage more real than this one. And so the question becomes, if all of this is true, what did Jung see next? What else did he discover in that space beyond the veil? In his most profound writings, Carl Jung detailed realms, beings, and truths that most people can only imagine. And in the next chapter of this story, we will explore those revelations. So stay with us, because what comes next might just change everything you thought you knew, not just about death, but about life. In our last chapter, we followed Carl Jung into the space beyond where the soul lifts from the body, entering a vast, radiant awareness that is more real than anything he had ever known. But that was only the beginning, because what Jung revealed next was even more intimate, more haunting, and more beautiful. He spoke of the exact moment the soul leaves the body, not with fear, not with chaos, but with peace. It's not a jolt, Jung said. Saying, it's not like being torn away. Instead, he described it like exhaling after holding your breath far too long, a release, a letting go. And in that breath, everything shifts. You are no longer in the body, but you still are. Awareness remains clearer than before. You can still feel, you can still perceive, but now it's without the filter of pain, without the distortion of ego, without the noise of thought. It's you, only pure. At first you see yourself, your body, your surroundings. You see the people hovering around you. But they all seem distant, like a dream fading just after waking. It's as if none of it belongs to you anymore, Jung wrote. And then something calls. Not a blinding light, not thunder or trumpets, but something gentle, something warm. It doesn't pull, it invites. A light that radiates peace, not brilliance. You don't see it with your eyes, you feel it, like the presence of love in a quiet room. You just know it's there. And when you step closer, you're not met by angels with wings or long-lost relatives waiting with open arms. Jung said something more mysterious and in many ways more moving. You are greeted by beings. He couldn't describe them in words. They had no shape, no form, but they were unmistakably present. You couldn't see them, but you could feel them, like how you can feel love without needing proof. It simply is. It's not a conversation. It's a recognition, a return to a place you had always known but forgotten, a place that feels more like home than any home you've ever had. But this is not just a reunion. It is a moment of truth. Jung said there is no judgment, no punishment, no divine voice asking what you've done with your life. Instead, something deeper happens. They show you, not the events of your life, but the feelings, what you felt, what others felt around you. The impact of every word, every silence, every touch. Your entire emotional imprint laid bare before you. You feel the pain you caused others, not as punishment, but as realization. This is what the other person felt. And it moves through you like a wave, not to shame you, but to wake you. And if you ever loved, you feel that too. But not like memory, no. You feel it again, intensified, pure, undistorted. A love so clear, so vast, it silences everything else. It's not God asking you who you were, Jung said. It's you, asking yourself without fear, without excuses. Did I become who I wanted to be? And then he spoke of something few dare to mention. Some souls, he said, refuse to go further. They are afraid, still attached to the world, to people, to unfinished dreams. They remain caught between two realities in a state Jung called the gray light. It's not torment, but neither is it peace. It's like a corridor with no exit, a waiting room between here and there, and you remain there until you choose to move on or to return. But the journey doesn't end there. What came next, Jung said, was even more astonishing. He described levels, layers of reality the soul moves through. Not places, but states. States of vibration. You don't ascend in space, you ascend in awareness. You rise not because you're worthy, but because you remember. Because you let go, because you become light again. Jung's voice, they say, would soften when he spoke of this part as if he were whispering something too sacred for ordinary conversation. Beyond those levels, he said, there is silence, but not an empty silence, a living one, like the breath of the universe itself. There are no forms, no names, no memory of who you were. There is only essence, only the soul stripped of its identity, returning to its original light. I cannot describe it in words, Jung confessed to his students. It is like returning to the source of all things, where you and the collective unconscious are no longer separate, but one. Yet even in death, Jung said, the soul still holds on. To wounds, to identities, to stories. These attachments act as anchors. We carry regret, longing, shame, even pride. And each of them, no matter how small, can slow the soul's return to its light. He saw how some souls wander unable to forgive themselves. Others stay back out of anger at the world. And some stay simply because they fear being forgotten. As if their life in the end didn't matter. But help does come. Beings return not to rescue, but to remind. You are more than your fear. You are never alone. And then something miraculous, many souls, Jung said, choose to return, to be born again, to step back into time, into struggle, into pain, not as punishment, but as opportunity. Because on the other side, they remember. Life is not suffering, it is the chance to grow. The soul does not come back to suffer. It comes back to become itself. He describes souls choosing their next life like a playwright casting their role. They select the parents, the place, the era. Even the challenges, not as victims, but as creators. It was his greatest realization. Nothing is random, not your pain, not your joy, not even the people you meet. Each encounter reflects something you came here to remember. You are not a body seeking meaning, Jung said. You are meaning that came into a body. Sometimes his words came in riddles, almost as if he couldn't say it outright, as if he knew not everyone was ready to hear. But for those who listened closely, the message was clear. The truth isn't just in what happens after death. The truth is in how you live now. There is no death, only a change of rooms. The hardest part isn't dying. The hardest part is being yourself. He spoke of a map, not a literal one, but a soul map, with crossroads, with roads we forget, and places where we remember. And one day, Jung said quietly, the greatest pain of the soul is not losing the body, it's forgetting who you are. Most people, he claimed, live asleep, afraid of what they'll see if they ever truly wake up. But waking up, that's the real purpose of life. He wasn't interested in religion, not dogma, not ritual. He spoke of something simple. Be the light even if you are surrounded by darkness. The soul is never lost. Even when we die afraid, even when we're confused, we are always found, because the light will always find the spark. Every human being, Jung said, is not an accident. You are an answer to an ancient prayer whispered in the dark. In one of his last writings, Jung shared this: I saw a soul returning to the light, and it cried not from pain, but from recognition, from realizing how deeply it had underestimated itself, and how deeply it had been loved all along. And maybe, just maybe, this moment right now is no accident either. Maybe these words reached you for a reason, because perhaps somewhere deep inside you already know. You've heard this voice before, the one Jung called the voice of the soul, and now it's calling you to remember. If even a flicker stirred inside you while hearing this story, don't walk away from it. Don't let it fade. Share this with someone else who may have also forgotten and might now be ready to remember. We'll meet again where words end and the real begins.